capstan shanty happens. And when I first heard this on an album called Harry Belafonte, Live at Carnegie Hall, many, many moons ago, I thought, first off, oh, what a beautiful song. And secondly, when I read the back of the album and saw that it was a sea shanty, I thought, well, I just can't imagine these hefty yo-ho-ho fellows singing this song and doing a whole lot of hard work during it. But once I understood that process of getting the slack out and then dragging the ship until it got over top of the anchor, then I understood that by the time 3 hours had passed and these guys had been going around in circles, and we all hate to go around in circles on a regular basis, that it was time for something a little mellower for these guys who were near on exhausted. And so this song was what was usually sung in the third stage of pulling up that capstan.
Some of you will recognize it. It's the beautiful state song of
Shenandoah, I long to hear you, and the crew says, away you rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away, we're bound across the wide Missouri. Now Shenandoah, I love your daughter. Away, you rolling river. For her I'd cross the raging water. We're bound away across the wide Missouri. Oh, Shenandoah, I'm bound to leave you. Away, you rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I'll not deceive you. Away, we're bound away across the wide Missouri. Away, we're bound away across the wide Missouri. Now this is a concertina, a little tiny squeeze box, not an accordion, but this one was made in 1887 and is still playing real well, which has led me to believe that cows back in those days who gave us this leather that was used on this were a lot tougher. And I've got shoes to prove it, because I've got shoes that I can wear for 2 years and then I have to throw them away. But this is a hardy box. So this was an instrument that I got in a trade, an even trade, for a banjo that was made in 1887 that I had, and I had always wanted one of these. Kevin, you know, somebody asked me if I grew up in Norfolk, and I said, nope, not yet. But having attempted to grow up in Norfolk, I saw a lot of sailors come and go, and I always loved seeing those pictures of a sailor sitting on a piling on a pier with a maybe a parrot on his shoulder, a bunch of seagulls, flock of seagulls out in the background, a couple of small children at his feet, and he had on one of those famous Greek fisherman's hats, and he had you know, a meerschaum pipe in his mouth, and in his lap he was playing a concertina, and yeah.
How do you preserve that leather when you use that?
Well,
Let it get rained on whether it
basically you can use some leather oil to keep it nimble, and you don't want it to get to the inner workings. So you know, any time that there winds up being a tear, I mean it's a basically an instrument that's an airtight compartment, and so you don't want any leaks in it, because when you know, basically if you're just pushing it, you don't get anything. But when you finally push a button, you still don't get anything until you squeeze on it, and that's why it's called a squeeze box, right? And then you have two different reeds for every note on this style concertina. One reed is when you're pushing, one is when you're pulling. And if that seems like a complicated thing, it's not really. In fact, my grandpa, who actually got me into playing little reed instruments like this, he was a traveling salesman and sold all kinds of interesting things. And one of the things that he sold, he was off to a traveling salesman's convention. He said, "What can I bring you?" I said, "Well, I always loved the way you played the harmonica, Grandpa Charlie, and I thought that I might like to learn how to play a little harmonica." And so he brought me a little harmonica, and it only had 4 holes in it, but they were the right 4 holes. And so if you wanted to play that scale that all those music teachers have tried so hard to convince us was so important. And by the end of a couple, 2 weeks, I was playing things like so you can get a lot of music out of a little tiny instrument with just 4 holes in it. And that's the same approach that was used in the design of that particular instrument, and this particular instrument, and even one of these. Now, correlating all of this, since this is an educational lecture series, Jeanne will tell you a little bit about the type of instruments that are used in folk music. And these, of course, it's a reed instrument. But back in the old days, we used to think of things as a reed instrument, or a type of drum, or this and the other. But there's a whole new way of looking at those things.
And actually, it's not that new. It's just not really taught in schools. This is the way ethnomusicologists look at instruments, because ethnomusicology means the science of music, and ethno means you're looking at many different cultures. If our vocabulary to talk about instruments is just what has come to us largely through European traditions, what we call Western traditions, there might be a brass family, there might be a string family, and so forth. But that's not very useful if you want to talk about an instrument that comes from Bali, and maybe to see how things are similar. So about 100 years ago, I think these are probably 2 individuals named Hornbostel and Sachs, came up with a way of talking about instruments in 4 basic categories by how the sound is produced by the instruments. So for example, if the sound is produced by blowing through an instrument, like this instrument here, or that instrument there, if air is what causes the vibrations that make music, it's called an aerophone. Aero meaning air, phone meaning sound. There you go. So these instruments over here that have strings, chordophone, string sound. These instruments that have skins on them, membranes, the vibration is coming off of the skin. This is called a membranophone. And then, for everything else, because there are subcategories of all of these groups, and actually they've added electrophones in modern time where the electronics are producing vibrations. And I think lamellophone is another large category where the tongue is involved. But for the most part, many instruments are part of the family called the idiophone. Id just means self, and phone is sound. So anything where the vibrations are made off of the body of the instrument is called an idiophone. Bob has just one of those such instruments right there.
That's right.
Because although he's going to put it up to his mouth, he is not going to
pluck it.
Yep. He's not
It
going
sounds just like this.
But you're not going to be blowing through it except for, yeah, right.
That way.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, it sounds just like this.
Okay.
Pretty exciting, huh? Nah, it's not. Because this is only part of the instrument. You yourself become the other part of the instrument. You become the sound chamber for it. And so when you hold it up against your teeth, or in some cases against your lips, you get this sound. And to change that sound, you have to change the lamina inside your mouth. And so you can, remember when we all learned how to say our vowels? Say them all together. A, E, I, O, U.
And sometimes Y.
And sometimes Y, but never on Friday. Okay. But if I were to put my mouth in those shapes, not doing anything with it other than just putting my mouth in those shapes, it would sound like this. Now, if I blow through it, I get. And so, you're actually making kind of a, it's like a voice synthesizer. I can even say. And so, it gives you all kinds of interesting sounds. Anyway, speaking of ships, the way that the ship gets underway, I mean, once you pull the anchor up, how does it go? Well, if it's a sailing ship, it goes by putting up the sails. And so we're going to teach you a type of shanty that was used for putting up the sails called a halyard shanty. And Jeanne's going to...
Would you like to help me with an idiophone over here?
You got good.
No.
You can shake an egg, can't you? Come on.
We have a volunteer? Volunteer.
Here's one.
All right, here we go.
A bold
Okay,
volunteer.
here's a good technique. Hold your hand like that, let it rest right there. That's half the work for you. Your arm.
Okay, and just keep time. Just
Would
keep
you like
time.
to? There you go, right there. Let the egg do the work for you.
And
There you
Jeanne,
go. I'm gonna use the drum.
Oh, you can
Oh, the
okay.
skull. Does anybody want the skull shaker? It's not nearly as cool as these. These make a much better sound, but it is glow in the dark. Here, there you go. You're hired. See, you're so close enough for that.
Okay, now, the trick is now, you gotta sing on the song, because that's the way that you are cued as to what exactly is happening in the process of putting the sail up. Now, the way it works is this. The ship has a mast sticking up in the air. Going across the mast is a yard that looks like this. The lower yards are in a fixed position. They can turn sideways, but they can't go up or down. But the upper yards are movable. They have to be moved up the mast so that they can get the sail in front of the wind and not just in front of the sail that's beneath it. Okay? So as that happens, these guys actually have to pull that yard up, and then the sail unfurls and comes down and does its job filling with wind. Okay? So the way we do this is by pulling on the line, which is another sailor word for rope, pulling on the line all at the same time. And the way this particular song works is that everybody is going to try to find their favorite arm and hold it up. This is going to be a little aerobics After dinner aerobics are always good. So just pick your favorite arm, hold it up, and repeat after me. Heave away.
Heave away.
Haul away.
Haul away.
Okay, so the way it works is in sailor language, heaving is pushing, except when you're seasick, but heaving is pushing, and hauling is pulling. Okay, so I'm gonna sing. Cape Cod girls, they use no combs, and you go heave away, haul away, and I'll say they comb their hair with codfish bones. Together we'll say we're bound away for Australia. Now, that takes more than one arm, okay? But you can clap the hands of the person next to you if you need to.
And the idea is so that we can all pull together. In a short haul, we all have to jerk together.
Yeah, and these were signals as to how this work was done. So,
Can I tell them for the advanced course of study?
Sure.
Okay, this is so that we all get the idea of being together in the song. But if you want to try as we go along to simulate like this, okay, while you're singing it, that's okay too.
Okay, so remember, heave away, haul away, we're bound away for Australia. All right, here we go. Now the Cape Cod girls, they use no combs. Heave away, haul away, they comb their hair with codfish bones, and we're bound away for Australia. So heave her up, my bully, bully boy, sing. Heave away, haul away. Well, heave her up, and don't you make a noise, and we're bound away for Australia. Now the Cape Cod boys ain't got no sleds. Heave away, haul away. Well, they slide down the hill on codfish heads, and we're bound away for Australia. So heave her up, my bully, bully boys. Heave away, haul away. Oh, heave her up, and don't you make a noise, and we're bound away for Australia. Now the Cape Cod mamas don't make no pies. Heave away, haul away. Well, they feed their children codfish eyes, and we're bound away for Australia. So heave her up, my bully, bully boys. Heave away, haul away. Oh, heave her up, and don't you make a noise, and we're bound away for Australia. Now Cape Cod dogs ain't got no tails. Heave away, haul away. Lord, they lost them all in those northeast gales, and we're bound away for Australia. So heave her up, my bully, bully boys.
Heave away, haul away.
Heave her up, and don't you make a noise, and we're bound away for Australia. And we're bound away for Australia. And we're bound away for Australia. So there you go. And that's a reed instrument, a lamellophone. Well, now we've got the anchor up. We've